Hey guys, it's Aman
And Christina
from Our Rich Journey. Today we are talking about how to adjust to life in Portugal. One of the questions that we get all the time is from people that are interested in moving to Portugal and asking us how have we adjusted to life here, especially after living here for over 3 years. I mean, I can't even believe it's been that long. It just seems like time has flown by. But for us, living here in Portugal has been a dream come true. And a big part of that was because of the way that we first got settled into this country. And that's what we want to talk about in this video. We want to talk about the things that you can do to help yourself settle here in Portugal. Because this is an amazing country with so much to see and do, and it's one of the most welcoming countries in the world. Healthcare is some of the best in the world. Housing is affordable. The visa process is one of the smoothest. There's diversity here. English is widely spoken. So needless to say, we think Portugal is a great place to live. And for anyone wanting to move to Portugal, it is so important that you settle into everyday life. Now, after being here for more than 3 years, one of the questions that we're also going to answer in this video is whether or not we see ourselves living in Portugal forever. Could we ever see ourselves moving back to the United States? We are also going to answer that question.
So let's get started with our tips on how to best adjust to life here in Portugal. And our first tip is the first place that you initially move here in Portugal really matters. Now, we're not saying that this first place has to be your forever home where you're going to stay throughout your duration here in Portugal. You can move around, but that first place that you pick is very important. And we say this because the culture, the activities, the resources in the city that you initially decide to move to will really set the tone for your experience here in Portugal. So I'll give you an example from our perspective. When we moved to Portugal, we lived in Lisbon for the first year. It had tons of resources to really help us acclimate to life in Portugal. We were taking language lessons. We were involved in different activities. There were so many different resources that helped us get adjusted. But then as we were living here for the first year, we started to explore different areas of Portugal. Ultimately, we ended up moving to the countryside, but picking that first city of living in Lisbon and really understanding all of the resources available to us helped us make a smooth transition from the United States to life here in Portugal.
And so it's really important to assess your needs before you come to Portugal so you can pick the right place to start your life here in Portugal. Do you need healthcare of a certain degree? Do you need international schools? Do you need to be around other expats, or do you prefer not to be around other expats? These are questions that you should know in advance so that when you pick your first place in Portugal, you're able to pick the right one to get started. Our next tip to help you get adjusted is that once you identify the housing that you are going to live in, try your hardest to set up your utilities in advance. All of the things that are necessary for your house to function, you want to have those set up before you move into the housing. And what we mean by this are things like electricity, Wi-Fi, water, all of the basic necessities that help your house run. Because we have heard horror stories of people buying houses or renting houses without the utilities turned on. And when they move into the house, when they've moved here to Portugal and arrived at that home, it has taken weeks, if not months, to set up some of those utilities. And could you imagine trying to get adjusted without having Wi-Fi, electricity, or even water? This is so important that you set these up in advance. So I'll share with you what we did. We worked with the real estate agent and the property manager to make sure that those utilities were set up in advance in our name. So we had our lights already on, the water was going, and our internet was already in place. So that when we arrived in Portugal, all we had to do was go shopping for furniture. But the necessities were already in place, and this allowed us to hit the ground running. We didn't have to deal with the hassle of trying to find the utility company, find the internet company, all these things that for a foreigner coming to Portugal can be challenging and frustrating at first. Our next tip for adjusting to life here in Portugal is to join local groups or activities. Now, when we first moved to Lisbon, one of the first things we wanted to do was get involved with the local community. So, sports is something that our family has always been a part of. We get excited playing basketball, swimming, doing anything outdoors. So that was the first thing we did. And for us, this expedited our adjustment here in Portugal because by joining those associations and those teams, our kids were able to make instant friends with their teammates. And for Christina and I, it was the same thing. And so for anyone moving here that has any types of hobbies, find a local group that you can join to help you assimilate into the community.
Our next tip is to take a language course. We think this is really important, and this is something that we did right when we moved here. You can take a very intensive course right when you get here to sort of front load that learning experience so that you understand the basics of the language. And in fact, we actually took a course before we moved here. We took an online course to really understand the basics of the language so that we could communicate.
Now, when you go to a major city, there are lots of opportunities to take these language courses. In Lisbon, for example, you can go to some of the local universities and go to school 5 days a week in some of the intensive courses.
Now, when you move to Portugal, you'll likely see that a lot of people here speak English, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't learn the language, which is Portuguese. So make an effort, take a language class, and learn Portuguese. Our next tip is to identify your medical network. Now, we're talking about everything that would be encompassed under your medical needs. So if you have an emergency, you need to understand where you can go, which hospital you can go to address that emergency. You should also identify your primary care physician, your dentist. All of these things are great to identify before you need them. This will help you adjust to Portugal so much easier.
So one of the things that we did was, of course, we identified all the emergency rooms that are nearby in case we have an emergency. And then when we signed up for our private health insurance, we used our insurance provider to identify all of the hospitals that we could go to for primary care, for dental help, and then we established relationships with those offices. So we have all of those relationships established with those offices so that if we need them, we know right where to go right away. Our next tip, and this is for the parents who have school-aged children, is to identify the schools in advance that your children will go to. Now, one of the things about Portugal is that if you are looking for an international school, it can be very, very competitive. And it can also be very expensive. And so if that is the route that you're going, you should establish what schools your kids are going to and get them into those schools in advance. Because if you come here without that, you will be struggling to find it. On the other hand, if your children go to a public school, you should also do the research to figure out what neighborhood that you're going to live in, because a lot of public schools here are based on the neighborhood that you live in. You see, schools are a huge deal when it comes to getting settled here in Portugal. We have been so fortunate that our children have just had a wonderful time at school. They love school. And so the transition of coming here has been so smooth for them because they love their school, they have so many friends at school, and they are establishing relationships that make it so easy for them to settle in.
Now, another reason why we say to take care of all that schooling as soon as possible is because wait lists can be very long. If you are planning on going to an international school, those schools may already be full. If you are trying to get them in at the beginning of the school year, you may not be able to get them into the school you want. And the same is actually true for public schools. Even though you may live in an area and the school is identified as being associated with the area that you live in, that school may be impacted and there may be no room for your children to attend that school. So you have to work through more lists of schools. So the earlier that you get involved in identifying the school that you want your children to go to, the better chances that they'll have of being able to attend that school. Now, if you want to learn more about the educational system and daycare here in Portugal, and also about all the other things associated with moving here to Portugal, like getting a visa, like taxes, like finding a home here in Portugal, we actually have a class. It's our Moving to Portugal course. If you are interested in that, we'll leave a link in the description below, or you can also visit our website at ourrichjourney.com. And our final tip for adjusting to life here in Portugal, and this is a really big one, is of course to find ways to stay connected to your friends and family back home, but also be committed to developing new relationships and meeting new people here in Portugal. This will really help with your adjustment here in Portugal.
Now, a lot of people have doubts and hesitation about moving to a country because of this particular point. They are afraid to make new friends, especially for all you adults out there. You are the ones that tend to have the hardest time transitioning because it requires you to do something new, to be outgoing, and for a lot of us, we're already stuck in our ways. You know, one of the things with having kids here, we've seen our kids adjust so easily because they make friends so fast. Now, Christina and I, we are very outgoing people, so we are able to make friends with adults very quickly as well. And if you struggle in this area, it's fine. You can take your time to make friends here, but it should be something that you should focus on doing. Making that commitment to be outgoing, to meet new people, and establish relationships here in Portugal.
So those are our tips for adjusting to life here in Portugal. Like we said, we have lived here for 3 years and we have loved every single minute of it. Now, at the very beginning of this video, we had mentioned we were going to discuss whether we see ourselves living here in Portugal forever. And the answer is...
Yes.
The answer is yes. We love it here. We see this as home. This is really our forever home. And that's why we make so many videos about Portugal, but also about saving, making, and investing money, because we want to encourage people to explore places that they may not have explored before or they may not have considered before. So if you like this video, if you want to learn more about Portugal, if you want to learn more about making, saving, and investing money for financial independence, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and join the journey.